Out to the Hooters Hot Wing Hotline we go.
Love it.
Would love some hot wings right now. And I bet you our guy, Sam Bruchhaus from Sumer Sports, loves himself a good hot wing. Sam, first time on the show. We appreciate you making time for us fine people here, if I may say that, at CHGO Bears. You are our draft expert today, Sam, so no pressure. You're going to get this right, buddy. We got number 10, we got 39, we got 41, we got 72. We got a 5th, a 6th, and 2 7ths. So, no pressure here. Why don't we start at the top? You're the Chicago Bears. This falls realistically. You're sitting at 10. You need help all over the field, offensive line, defensive line. Playmakers isn't terrible too. What way would you go ideally if you're the Bears, Sam, at 10?
Look, I think it's really interesting because they're in the zone where it may make sense to take Kelvin Banks from Texas. I think that the tackles actually for the Bears this year were a little better than, they got the rap for. I think a lot of the sacks did come from Caleb not being able to manage or avoid sacks. That's what our artificial intelligence that we have indicates as well. But he's a elite swing offensive lineman who I think may be a good fit. Where I would actually really go, though, if I was the Bears, is I'd look on defense. I'd look at the edge market. And I think Shamar Stewart may be an interesting pick for him. Right now, he's a little lower on the consensus big board than the Bears pick, which means they would be reaching slightly on him. I expect him to climb up the consensus big board. We're talking about a 290-pound guy that can realistically and elitely play the edge rushing position. And especially with the new administration that's coming in to coach for the Bears, they love those bigger defensive linemen. That's what they've shown in the past. It's going to be really interesting to see how they build. But I think the edge rushing position is better right now because I think there's some great interior offensive linemen. Gray Zabel from North Dakota probably can get him in the second round. And I just wonder how they're going to capitalize. I know that Ben Johnson has had a lot of good offensive lineman before, but I think the edge rushing position may be the one.
Well, since you're so deep into it, and it's Shamar Stewart is at Texas A&M. I mean, is this a physical freak who could be an absolute impact guy? But his, if you just, for those of us who didn't watch a lot of Aggie football, his numbers don't jump off the page. Why do you think his production was shy of where you'd want him to be, which perhaps, by the way, makes him available to the Bears?
Yeah, so this is a greater complex problem, especially in this draft, because there's multiple defensive lines that have guys that are all first, second, third round guys, top 100 certified players. The Michigan defensive line is one of those. They have Mason Graham, Josiah Stewart, and Kenneth Grant, all of which project to be good players at the next level. Ole Miss is another one that is very similar. They have Princely Yu, J.J. Pegues, Walter Nolan. And when you get these lines that you can basically platoon swap, it ends up decreasing the production just in the counting stats. We have our artificial intelligence metrics. The dude's been elite for the Aggies. In those, just on the play-by-play basis, I think that shows a little better what he can do at the next level than just his counting stats. So I think he looked great and physical at the Senior Bowl. I'm an old school kind of football guy. I was coached by Willie Fritz. He was one of the oldest coaches in college football when I was in college. And so there was a little stuff that you need to clean up. He was a little physical, hit the quarterback a time or two. I know that won't go over well in the pros if Caleb's your quarterback, but I think he's an excellent player. And I think it shows up in the non-counting stats because of the way that A&M defense was structured.
So, by the way, Sam, dominating linebacker at Tulane. The dude was just an absolute menace. And
I don't know about that. I was more of a special teams guy, but I appreciate
if you're trying to get a comp from, just think Urlacher in his prime. Go ahead.
That's amazing. That's amazing. It does feel like the Bears at 10 are kind of in a weird spot, right, Sam? Like, I don't think the Abdul Carters or the Mason Grahams of the world are going to necessarily fall to 10. I know you mentioned the tackle from Texas. I don't feel great about him at 10. There's like a few players that you could name that I'd feel better if they moved back on. Like, is there any opportunity that the Bears will have to be able to trade back, or is there really nobody that teams are going to want to trade up for? The only person that comes to mind, obviously, is the running back that nobody in Chicago wants to even consider at 10. So he'll remain nameless so I don't trigger our chat. But like
Ashton Genty.
Ashton Genty, correct. Like I don't know if is there a possibility of the Bears trading back where some of these players make a little more sense down the line?
I think you're 100% correct. I think the turn of the draft happens at about 8, at pick 8, pick 9. And that's where it's going to be interesting to see what teams like the Bears or the Saints or the Panthers do, particularly if no one out of that top 5 or 6 falls. Will Campbell is another guy who I think could be of interest. I'd be shocked if he gets out of the top 5. I think the Patriots are probably the best landing spot for him. I think trading back would, in this draft, be a really good move because I think there are a lot of guys who just have not produced but have excellent prospect profiles. Michael Williams, Jalen Walker, both out of Georgia. And then we talked about Shamar Stewart a little bit. And I think particularly given the depth of this draft at the swing offensive line position, I saw a comment pop up about Gray Zabel. Again, I loved him at the Senior Bowl. And the edge rushing position. Those are both pretty deep. I think trading back, collecting assets for later or years down the line may be a good move. That would be the advisable move, in my opinion, personally.
All right, let's.
Well, you mentioned being
ahead.
at the Senior Bowl. Obviously, Zabel becomes the darling every year. Somebody from North Dakota State becomes the most popular player at the Combine. But I'm curious, like your biggest takeaways at the Combine for players, in the trenches, which is really where the Bears are dialed into right now.
Yeah, I think Gray Zabel was the guy. I mean, when you're talking about winning every single rep, it's very rare to see something like that. And he was able to do that. We're now seeing him be mocked in multiple mock drafts across the industry, as a solid first-round guy. Now, I think that it'll cool off a little bit. I think that's just hot takes coming off the Senior Bowl. I do agree with you. I think he'll be available. Another guy that I really liked was Ariante Ursary from Minnesota. Big, huge guy. He's more of a certified tackle. But he was able to really win against a pretty violent edge class that involved Mike Green. He was able to shut him down several times. It involved, guys like Shamar Stewart, guys like Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. And that's another name that I really liked in the trenches as well from the Senior Bowl.
All right, let's go down the board here to 39 and 41. So, you got a lot of options here. You could package those two, move up. You could take one of them and try to trade out and go down. Or let's just, for this moment in time, Sam, you're keeping both of those guys. You're the Bears. And let's just say, for argument's sake, they went ahead and did what you said. They took Shamar Stewart at 10. What are you looking at 39 and 41 likely as far as you can go any which way you want to go with this one, obviously. O-line is in need, but you could be playing elsewhere.
Yeah, I think it has to be O-line if Stewart is the top pick, or if they do trade back slightly or something like that. Zabel and Ursary are right in that zone. Currently on the consensus big board, 38 and 39. I think those are going to be the picks. And then 41 is kind of a dealer's choice. There is a wide receiver, Trey Harris, that I think would be an excellent addition to this group. I think he's one of the better wide receivers in this draft, even though he's at 46 on the consensus big board. I think the rise of Jackson Dart, honestly, can be attributed to a guy like Trey Harris, who was catching passes for him in Lane Kiffin's offense. He's excellent in our AI metrics. That's somewhere they could go. Another guy, if they just want to keep trying at the edge position, is Donovan Ezeruku out of Boston College. I thought he had a good Senior Bowl. He also does pretty well in our artificial intelligence metrics as well.
So as you go and really look at your numbers and try to figure out why some receivers who are overlooked are successful and vice versa, is there any recurring theme that jumps to mind that perhaps if Ryan Poles is watching this podcast because he loves it so much should be paying attention to?
I think what you really try to see is someone, particularly in the second and third rounds, who is elite in something. And Trey Harris is an elite route runner, which is very helpful in the Lane Kiffin system that we've seen produce, back when he was at Alabama, back when he was at USC, and so forth and so on, produce really, really productive wide receivers. So I think you're looking for someone with an elite trait. It's going to be interesting how these wide receivers mix in Ben Johnson's offense, though, because I was fascinated. I was looking at it today. the ADOT in that Lions offense is very low, one of the lowest in the leagues. And so I'm wondering what they're going to prioritize, because they did have some different guys. Tim Patrick was a bigger guy. Amon-Ra St. Brown was more of a small slot route runner type guy, not a huge yak guy. And then Jameis Williams was both the home run hitter as well as the reverse guy and the guy who would get the handoffs. I'm a little interested to see how DJ Moore and Odunze fit in. I think Odunze may be a power slot type guy. But it's going to be a real year of reckoning for those two guys if they can't produce on the level that Ben Johnson's able to get out of St. Brown and Williams this year. And I wouldn't be shocked if they do try to buffer that position in the draft, particularly around this range.
Tell me why you're not worried about the injury propensity for Trey Harris.
I just think he's a good player, and I think that's really the option of why he's dropped. And I think when you're able to take guys who are immensely talented at the consensus big board position that they're at, which he is, and with a lesser value pick, it typically works out pretty well. I mean, we've seen the Philadelphia Eagles, for example, do this time and time again, where it seems like a guy is a little bit undervalued. They select him right at the pick in which the consensus agrees with him on, and ends up working out for them.
Well, when you talk about injuries,
do you like the way I'm putting Sam on the spot here? Do you think that I'm doing a good job? I'm trying to,
You're amazing.
Thank you
in every way.
Thank you.
This is great. I love it. Some great back and forth.
Well, when you talk about injuries, if Josh Simmons doesn't get injured, where is he being drafted?
That's an excellent point. And again, this is a pretty deep offensive line draft. That being said, there are only a couple of guys who are just certified tackles. Josh Simmons is one of those guys. I think Ursery's another one. Will Campbell's probably the third as well, and you can mix in some guys after that. I don't think Kelvin Banks is a certified tackle, but I think he's one of the better players in this draft. It's so tough in football to predict what an injury will do. I mean, some guys are able to bounce back, and then we saw with Kirk Cousins this year, other times it's just a completely different player. And so I think the best advice I've gotten from our president, Thomas Dimitroff, who was a longtime scout general manager, is you always try to grade what the guy can do, not what he can't do. Injuries are one of the things that you can't control at all. So you try to identify and coach around and get him in the building and get him in the strength and conditioning program and keep him healthy that way. But it's always something to consider, particularly if it's a time and time again durability issue.
So Sam, we can't get this wrong, or the Bears can't. Can I say we? You want to be on the we team today? What do you think?
We. Depends on what you say next.
We over here at CHGO and our advice need to get this right. So we're relying on you, Sam.
Okay.
I'm wondering the philosophy of this dude was a great tackle, but he doesn't have the long arms, so we project him as a guard. We love this guy. We love the talent here. We love the size, but we don't love him as a tackle. We think he can be an absolute mauler inside. Versus, say, okay, I'm going to pay Trey Smith whatever the market is, $21 to $25 million.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a guy like that where you feel comfortable? I know that this dude inside in the NFL, in my mind, I'm gonna bet my football brilliance going on podcasts left and right on that dude.
So I think you hit an interesting topic here, which is that typically the highest paid guards come from free agency. What that means is you're able to get good guards in free agency, like Trey Smith, like Kevin Zeitler, who was with Ben Johnson this year in Detroit, like Patrick McCary, who's another swing guy, played tackle at the Baltimore Ravens. And that's why I'm a little hesitant to just mock a guy like Kelvin Banks in the first round to a team like the Bears, just because you're not able to get that positional value from the draft, and you can go get it in free agency. So it does make sense to wait until the second or the third or the fourth round. What I will note, especially talking to the scouts, because analytically projecting cross position is pretty difficult, especially if we haven't seen them there. However, what the scouts that we have on staff have informed me of is basically, like you mentioned, it's always trying to go from tackle to the middle. And the reason why is, again, you can go and get guards in free agency, and you can be a little bit more comfortable about swapping guys in and out, it's very difficult to go to the more valuable position of the tackle position. And so I think, you're looking for a guy like Mekhi Becton who has elite tackle size, but, doesn't really have what it takes, particularly foot speed and stuff like that. You move him inside to guard and he just becomes a house with his size. And you hope that, he can continue moving and continue, which is another key item, especially for guards versus tackles, lateral movement in the pulling game. And so that's what you're kind of looking at. A lot of these guys do have that versatility.
We want to get to the running backs, but just because you just brought up Becton, and then there's Smith, and then Kevin Zeitler from the Lions, you'd be robbing Peter, hopefully to, win in Chicago. Which of those three, if you could only have one and factor in their money, would you make a play for?
I am of the mind that Trey Smith is probably not going to be worth the biggest guard contract in the history of guards, personally. RAI was a little bit lower on him than the consensus was, and I think that kind of ended up popping up in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl. And they were a very good, successful running team on a play-by-play basis, not a bunch of big plays, which you kind of tag on the running backs a little bit more in KC. But down the stretch, they kind of started dropping down the rankings. That's what ended up hurting them in the Super Bowl. And so I think you're looking at the other younger guys like a Becton, like a Patrick McCary from the Ravens, who's not necessarily a younger guy, but is a more versatile guy. And I think you're looking at those swing positions, particularly because it doesn't really feel like any of the offensive linemen for the Chicago Bears are made men yet. So you're definitely looking for guys that have positional versatility, but I'd stay away from Trey Smith despite the rumors. I don't know if he's worth the contract.
Sam, this is supposed to be one of the deeper running back drafts we've seen in a long time. You saw three good ones over there at the Senior Bowl, and Ollie Gordon, Devin Neal, Trevor Etienne. Did one of them stand out among the rest as a potential Bears draft pick in that second round?
Yeah. I typically, again, going back to positional value, would prefer to take a running back in the third round or after. However, the Senior Bowl was very interesting, and it really stands out of why that positional value is, because it's difficult for a running back to stand out. You're dealing with tag offs. No one's going to the ground. You're not able to show, your ability to be elusive or break tackles. I like Trevor Etienne. I'm a little biased. He grew up near me. Travis Etienne, his brother, played football with me. I think he's a versatile, more bowling ball guy that can get involved in the passing game as well. I know we've seen David Montgomery have a lot of success with that kind of archetype. With Ben Johnson, one I liked who's really, really far down consensus big boards, but I watched him all year. He's from Syracuse. His name's LaQuint Allen. He's a real weapon, both in the passing and the running game, but he doesn't have the running back size that you typically like in the NFL. I'm wondering if he's not a standout from the Senior Bowl, and if he may creep into the 5th, 6th, 7th rounds rather than being an undrafted guy, and whether he's not a better option than some of these guys that are super duper highly rated, even if you don't want to spend that draft capital at the top of the draft.
Really interesting stuff, helping us get ahead of the game here. We're a week away from the NFL Combine, obviously. So with one more running back question for me, who are you taking from Ohio State, Judkins or Travion Henderson?
Man, that's a great question. I think Henderson is probably the better guy. I know that Judkins also had some injury concerns. And that, talking about the injuries earlier, the running back position is one where the injury concerns are like big, especially in college when these guys like to, really put miles on them. Luckily, for the most part, both of those guys were in some type of committee running back, but Henderson is I think, the better one this year.
Sam Bruchhaus, great stuff, man. This was a pleasure having you. We love what you're doing over there at Sumer Sports. We love Thomas. We love Lindsay. And now we love you.
Appreciate it. Love you guys too, man. This is awesome.
Well, wait till you see him play the harmonica. You might think.
On the way out here, Sam, because I was listening to every podcast you've ever done, getting ready to talk to you. Would you like to explain how you got the Super Bowl pick wrong and why you thought the Chiefs were going to win, like I did, like most of us did?
I am glad to explain, because as an analyst, it's always interesting. I won't call it fun, particularly when you have to watch the Eagles, fans be excited, which is not my favorite. I may have I love wrestling. I love professional wrestling, like WWE. So I may have a heel-like relationship to the Philadelphia Eagles fans, especially because Sean Syed, who we work with as well, is on, Shil Kapadia's Philly podcast and stuff like that. So I may have to be the CM Punk Chicago-made character in the Eagles. But what I will say, and what I didn't expect, was that they were just going to be able to floor that offensive line. We're talking about Trey Smith. We're talking about Creed Humphrey and Joe Thuney. I did not expect the level of domination across the defensive line. I thought that was going to be something that was excellent to watch. I thought it was going to be a real hard-nosed battle, and they just ended up winning the entire game on the defensive trench side. Didn't expect that. Thought it was going to be a more even matchup, and thus I took that on that one.
We'll accept it.
We were all scared of Kansas City. Everybody wanted the Eagles to win, but everybody was just scared that the Chiefs were just going to be the Chiefs. And
I didn't want the
even
Eagles
when
to
they
win.
were up 24-0, everyone was afraid to say the game was over, even though it was clearly over.
Right.
Well, the Chiefs are.
The narrative that goes around is now Jalen Hurts is one of the best quarterbacks in the league because blah, 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 blah. And I was like, that game was won solely on defense. They could have scored twice or 3 times. And they would have still won the game. I mean, all of those touchdowns that the Chiefs ended up scoring were trash touchdowns at the end of the game where they're just trying to get whatever they can. I think all of us could have gone out there and played offense for the Eagles, and we still might have been able to win the game because of the level of defensive domination.
That's all true, and Jalen made some big time throws. Not that they really needed any of it, but he really did. And by the way, having AJ Brown doesn't hurt when you can just.
Oh, certainly. He is excellent in all of our metrics. One of the best wide receivers in the league. I think that people don't give AJ Brown enough credit.
Yeah, I mean, 4th down the sidelines, no problem. That thing that is a hell of an option to be able to turn to. All right, Sam, let's do this again as we get closer to the draft. We appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate y'all.
We all silly like the mayor.